The writer-activist Henry David Thoreau proclaimed in his 1851 essay, Walking, "And wildness is the preservation of the world." Hello from Thoreau Farm, the birthplace of Henry David Thoreau in Concord, Massachusetts. I'm Michael Frederick, Executive Director of the Thoreau Society, and on behalf of the Right Connection, I want to welcome you to this virtual webinar, Henry Thoreau's and Al Gore's Climate Reality, which is part of the 24-hour reality countdown to the future, inspired by Thoreau Farm's book of essays, What Would Henry Do? In Henry's 19th century writings on the environment, we'll explore the greatest challenge facing the 21st century, the climate crisis. This webinar features two Al Gore-trained members of the Climate Reality Leadership Corps, who are familiar faces here at Thoreau Farm: Margaret Carol Bergman, Keith Bergman, whom I'll introduce in a moment. Thoreau published his masterwork Walden with Boston, Ticknor and Fields in 1854. Along with Ralph Waldo Emerson, Thoreau helped to establish this uniquely American nature writing genre in literature. His work influenced John Muir and Muir's work in helping to establish national parks. The nature genre in American literature also inspired Annie Dillard, Edward Abbey, the biodiversity work of conservation biologist Edward O. Wilson. Contemporary nature writers who have been influenced by Thoreau include Camille Dungy, Rebecca Solnit, and Catherine Alto, who will be joining us for a webinar on October 31st. Details to be published to our website soon. Thoreau had a deep and abiding interest in botany, ethnology, surveying, cartography. His journal is being used today by Richard Premack to better understand climate change. Thoreau kept detailed notes on temperature, migratory birds, and the budding of flora in Concord. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. Margaret Carol Bergman has been Thoreau Farm's Executive Director since 2015 and was trained at Climate Reality's first ever virtual global training this July. A journalist with roots in nonprofit management, Margaret served as the publisher for the award-winning Provincetown Arts Press, Inc., reporter for the Nantucket Enquirer and Mirror, editor for the Nantucket Independent, and regional editor for Coastal New England for America Online and the Huffington Post's Patch Media. Living and reporting in New England, Margaret appreciates how much our daily lives are influenced by the hand of nature. She received a New England Press Association Award for environmental writing. The Bergmans live in a 575 square foot winterized fishing and hunting camp on White Pond here in Concord. Their adult children visit in shifts. Her husband, Keith Bergman, who joins us also today, was one of the first 50 trained by Al Gore and the Climate Project in 2006, has served as a climate reality mentor since 2007, and is on the leadership team of the Boston Metro chapter of Climate Reality. Bergman is recently retired after 37 years as a municipal manager in Massachusetts, volunteering with the International City County Management Association as a senior advisor for Massachusetts. He is also immediate past president of the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, the regional planning agency for the 101 cities and towns in Metro Boston. Bergman holds a master's in city and regional planning from the Harvard Kennedy School. Keith is a graduate of Vanderbilt University in Nashville, where he studied political science, not climate science, and is a firm believer that sound public policy should be based on truth, no matter how inconvenient. As this webinar proceeds, if you have any questions you'd like to ask, please chat me using the chat function. Margaret, I'll hand things over to you now.
Thank you, Michael, for that kind introduction. And thank you in the audience for joining us tonight. We hope to shed some light on the climate crisis, and afterward, we hope you do ask us questions. As Mike said, please submit them in the chat feature throughout the talk. Both of our organizations, Thoreau Farm and the Thoreau Society, have partnered to create The Right Connection, a series of author talks, seminars, and writing workshops. You can see what else we're offering this fall at thoreaufarm.org or thoreausociety.org. We're adding new virtual programs weekly, almost weekly, so be sure to check back often. We're all socially distancing at Thoreau Farm tonight. Mike is in his office upstairs. I'm downstairs in the parlor, and Keith is in the birth room. I'd like to start our presentation by reading 3 brief selections from Thoreau Farm's book, What Would Henry Do? Essays for the 21st Century. President Jimmy Carter is the featured essayist in our book, which was published during the Thoreau Bicentennial. President Carter recently celebrated his 96th birthday. We asked President Carter to write an essay because he is a Thoreauvian and the first global leader to recognize the problem of climate change. Also, one of my founding board members, Joseph Wheeler, who grew up on Thoreau Farm and was born in the same airspace as Henry, worked for President Carter during his administration. I hope you're watching tonight, Joe. What Would Henry Do by Jimmy Carter. Having read much of Thoreau's writing and having visited Walden Pond, I can understand how different were the threats to our environment 170 years ago. Global warming was first detected when I was president by scientists at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute in Massachusetts, and I was both skeptical and alarmed by their report. It was a few years later that human activity was found to be the cause of the increase in temperature. This is one of the most serious threats to our planet, along with nuclear weapons. And I am sure that Thoreau would be deeply concerned and personally active in combating these problems. Not being averse to civil resistance, he would probably be in the forefront of activists, as well as a prolific writer and debater on the public stage. His major weapon would be the logic of his exhortations, and he would be prolific with his explanations of how deterioration of our environment would affect the average person in our society. His emphasis most likely would be on the poorest among us, being the first victims, as he defended those who were enslaved during his lifetime. Next, we'll take a peek at an essay that talks about Thoreau, the first climate scientist. His journals, written in the 1850s, contain observations, as Mike had said, on leafing, bird migration, insects, wild berries, and flowers. They're the earliest record of temperature, rainfall, snowfall, ice melt, and other scientific observations in New England. Today, Richard Primack, a professor at Boston University, has used Henry's data as a baseline for how much our New England climate has changed. His book, Walden Warming, Climate Change Comes to Thoreau Woods, is in many ways a scientific collaboration with Henry. Here's an excerpt from Primack's essay. Is climate change really happening in Concord? Were Thoreau alive today, he would recognize climate change as one of the most pressing issues of our time. He would advise us to lead materially simple lives. Thoreau would encourage us to walk in natural places and observe what is there. We should learn the names and characteristics of the birds, mammals, plants, and other species. As we do, we will understand nature better and be better advocates for all its protection. We will see climate change and its impacts. We, like Thoreau, should be citizen scientists. We should gain and share insights from the natural world and become more effective thinkers and communicators. And last but not least, Ed Begley Jr. is an American actor known for his film and television work. He is also a Thoreauvian, serving on the board of directors for the Walden Woods Project, a land conservation organization that protects the forest around Walden Pond. Ed looks to the past to see what we need to do today to stop climate change. Here's a brief selection from his essay. Happy birthday, Henry. Just to bring you up to speed, the natural world that you so revered hit a real low in the late 60s, the 1960s. We had horrible air pollution in most of our cities and rivers catching fire outside Cleveland. The very symbol of our nation, the bald eagle, was headed for extinction. But then a crazy thing happened. We actually started to make things better with incredible leadership from both Republicans and Democrats. We passed something called the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and the Endangered Species Act, after which things started to improve on several fronts. Ed's essay hints at the work that needs to be done by all of us who live in the United States. So Thoreau Farm is pleased to be able to host this virtual presentation on the climate crisis and its solutions as part of Climate Reality's 24 Hours of Reality Countdown to the Future. First, a bit about the Climate Reality Project. We're volunteer climate activists whose acts of leadership spread awareness, drive action, and support solutions for climate change. We're most known for giving slideshow presentations based on the one made famous by Climate Reality's founder, former President Al Gore, Vice President Al Gore, in the 206 Academy Award-winning documentary, An Inconvenient Truth. Climate Reality began 14 years ago last month when Mr. Gore trained the very first class, 50 folks, in his barn at the Gore Farm in Carthage, Tennessee. Keith Bergman was one of those first 50, seen here sitting in the front row, second from the left. In recent years, the Climate Reality tradition has continued here in Concord, Massachusetts, at the Thoreau Birth House. Thoreau Farm has often hosted Climate Reality's Boston Metro chapter for meetings and presentation training boot camps. Climate Reality went global this summer with the first ever virtual trainings led by Mr. Gore, held online due to COVID restrictions. I was one of the nearly 10,000 trainees participating from around the world. And for 24 Hours of Reality, Countdown to the Future, the world is mobilized again with thousands of presentations, including this one, taking place all over the next 24 hours. So as I call on Keith to make the slideshow presentation from Thoreau Farm, let's begin with a message from Climate Reality's founder, former Vice President Al Gore.
Hello, everyone. I'm Al Gore, and I want to thank you for joining us today for 24 Hours of Reality, Countdown to the Future. As all of you know, we're living through truly extraordinary times, and if you're like most people, you look at these challenges that we're facing now, the climate crisis getting worse, the COVID-19 pandemic, structural and institutional racism, the challenges to the operations of democracy, and you ask yourself, what can we do? How do we overcome these truly existential threats that are connected, and how do we build together the sustainable future and the just and fair future that we want and deserve? Well, the presentation you're about to hear and the discussion you're about to join is about these questions. Your host is an incredible climate reality leader that I personally have worked with. And through their presentation, you'll learn the science behind the climate crisis and why it is having such a devastating impact on the ecological balance of our planet. You'll also learn how the climate crisis is connected to the COVID-19 pandemic and is connected to the broader injustices and inequities, not only in the U.S. where I'm located, but in places all around the planet. Just as important, you'll learn that we have the solutions, and you'll learn how we can work together to solve these crises, starting with a green recovery and with a just transition to clean energy and the technologies that can make our world better in every way. You'll learn what you personally can do to make a difference and to help us create the future that we want and that humanity deserves. So before I hand you back to your host, I want to say one other thing. Thank you for being a part of this global conversation. The truth of our circumstances is very clear. We have to solve the climate crisis, and we have the solutions we need today. I know that we can solve the climate crisis. We have the political will. You know it's a renewable resource, but it's really because of people like you who are ready to commit the time and energy and attention and stand up and fight for a better world. Because of you, I know that we will succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gore, and all those of you who are joining us online. I'm Keith Bergman, and I'm honored and humbled to be speaking to you from the very room in which Henry David Thoreau was born on July 12, 1817. How inspiring it is to be in this space, which serves as a writer's retreat with a replica of the desk that Thoreau had when he lived at nearby Walden Pond. And I want to offer my thanks to Thoreau Farm Executive Director, Margaret Carroll Bergman, for hosting us, and to Mike Frederick of the Thoreau Society for his introductions. And as we've said, Mike will be moderating the question and answer session which follows this presentation. To reach even more audiences on the climate crisis and its solutions, Mr. Gore and Climate Reality have an updated and abbreviated version entitled Truth in 10, which can even be presented in 10 minutes. So we're happy to try to do that for this year's 24 Hours of Reality Countdown to the Future. So let's begin the Truth in 10 slideshow with this picture called the Blue Marble, taken by the last Apollo mission. It's the most published photograph in all of history, and it shows our Earth from space and reminds us that we all share the same home. And we're going to start with 3 questions that must be asked about combating the climate crisis. Must we change? Can we change? And will we change? And we asked those same 3 questions 1 year ago to a group right here at Thoreau Farm during last year's 24 Hours of Reality, which we delivered in person. Now, a spoiler alert on what their answers are, but let's hear what they had to say. Folks, there are only 3 questions remaining to be asked and answered about the climate crisis. Number 1, must we change?
Yes!
Can we change?
Yes!
Will we change?
Yes!
All right. All right. Well, and there were Margaret, Mike, and myself a year ago. I hope we didn't let the cat out of the bag with those answers, but let's proceed. The first question, must we change, is one that requires a little explanation of what the climate crisis is all about. This is the horizon of the Earth, and it illustrates how thin the sky is. It's not the vast expanse that we see when we look up at the sky from the ground. It's a very fragile layer that surrounds our planet. And it's a problem because when the sunlight comes through that layer and warms up the Earth, then some of the heat that's absorbed is radiated back out to space in the form of infrared radiation. And some of it is trapped by the natural greenhouse layer, which is a good thing. It keeps temperatures within a healthy boundary here on Earth. But the problem is we're thickening that greenhouse gas layer by spewing 152 million tons of man-made heat-trapping gas into it every single day. And so where does that greenhouse gas pollution come from? Well, a lot of sources. Transportation is one. It's the largest sector in Massachusetts. That's a cause. The thawing of permafrost is another, burning of forests, mining, methane from landfills. But the biggest source by far is our dependence on fossil fuels, which results in all the CO2 being spewed into the sky. And you can see that after World War II, our use, it really started shooting up the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, and it's still going up. As a result, the extra heat that's trapped by the global warming pollution drives temperatures up. And by the way, this year is 70% likely to be the hottest year ever measured. 19 of the hottest, of the 20th hottest years have been since 2001, and 5 hottest have all been in the last 5 years. And speaking today from the house where Henry David Thoreau was born, it seems particularly appropriate to ask, as Thoreau did, What is the use of a house if you haven't got a tolerable planet to put it on? Comparing Thoreau's field notes from the 1850s to the more recent research by Professor Primack and his Walden Warming, we can see that woody plants in Concord are leafing out 18 days earlier now than in Thoreau's time. April 30th on average now compared to May 8th over a century and a half ago. And this year, in 2020, Massachusetts just experienced its hottest summer on record. But if we take a step back and look at the Earth as a whole, we see that 71% of the planet is covered by the ocean, and 93% of all that extra heat that's being trapped goes into the ocean. And the ocean temperatures are setting a new height record almost every year. And this year is very likely to set the new all-time record. An important point made by Pope Francis and others is that deterioration of the environment through depletion of resources, pollution, and destruction of ecosystems has the biggest impact on poor people and also communities of color. That's why in the United States, we have the new Poor People's Campaign, and the Climate Reality Project has partnered with that campaign. If you look at the 10 counties most vulnerable to flooding and other disasters, they are 81% minority in population. And the higher temperatures we're experiencing are also associated with more fires. Of course, we're seeing that in California a lot this year, hundreds of wildfires. The reinsurance companies are certainly paying heed because they have to pay out when these disasters strike. And you can see the pattern that they have been following. It's also melting the ice. Here's an unnamed huge glacier in Greenland 85 years ago, and here's what it looks like now. And if you superimpose NASA's measurement of how much the ice has melted and fallen into the sea in Greenland, it's melting much faster than they thought, 4 times faster. And it's mostly coming from the so-called permanent ice sheet. The same thing is happening in Antarctica. You can see how the melting of the ice in Antarctica has accelerated dramatically recently. And of course, when this land-based ice mass melts, you see sea level rise. Here are the top 10 cities at risk in rank of population. Here are the top 10 at risk, ranked by assets at risk. And you see Miami and New York, Newark are among the top 3. It's also a national security issue. And the United States Defense Department has for many years warned us about food and water shortages, pandemic disease, and refugee flows caused by the climate crisis. And the climate crisis is a medical emergency, not least because tropical diseases are moving north. Airline travel has a lot to do with this, but the climate conditions are changing and changing where these diseases can take root and become endemic. And some of these diseases come because we're encroaching on previously wild areas where millions of viruses are still located, and we haven't encountered them before. There are 5 new infectious diseases emerging every single year. And we have to focus on the racial injustice that's also seen in the excess death rate for Black Americans from COVID-19. And that's because of excessive poverty, the lack of access to healthcare, living conditions, non-zoomable jobs. There are a lot of factors, but we have to address this ethical crisis. And it's not only people that are affected by climate change. We're in danger of losing up to half of all the living species with which we share this planet. And in this century, that happens unless we get busy and reduce this pollution that's causing temperatures to go up so dramatically. And you see that it all adds up, all these impacts of the climate crisis. It's unaffordable. and it's the largest threat to the global economy. So the answer to the first question, must we change, is clearly yes. What about the second question? Can we change? Well, luckily, the answer to that question is yes as well, because we have the solutions at hand. Actually, 20 years ago, the best projections for wind energy were that we might reach 30 gigawatts by 2010. We've already beat that goal by 22 times over. Here's the exponential curve showing the use of wind energy, and it's an inspiring increase. And it's even more inspiring when you look at the best projections for solar 18 years ago. By 2010, they estimated we might be able to add 1 gigawatt per year. Well, when 2010 rolled around, we beat that goal by 17 times. And last year, we beat it by over 121 times. And here's the exponential curve in solar photovoltaic installations. It's even steeper and going up faster. And it's because the cost of these technologies is coming down so quickly. And we're not going to run out of solar energy. We get as much in 1 hour as the entire global economy uses in a full year. And we're seeing battery storage improve. And look at these future projections for this new trillion-dollar industry. We're also seeing electric vehicles begin to displace the internal combustion vehicles. And here's the exponential curve showing increase in electric cars on the road. And putting it together here in Concord, we know that solar panels can recharge the battery in your Prius Prime in the time it takes you to walk around Walden Pond twice, or that's been our experience. Although it's tough to get into Walden today. It's such a hot day. So can we change? Yes, we can. But the most important question is, will we change? And that's kind of the main reason why we're here. And our hope is that we will change and that government will uphold just policies and oppose unjust ones. As Thoreau wrote of his government in Civil Disobedience, why does it not encourage its citizens to be on the alert, to point out its faults and do better than it would have them? In 2015, the Paris Agreement indicated that maybe we will change because every nation in the world agreed to go down to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by mid-century. And yes, the current president wants to withdraw, but under the law, that cannot happen until the day after this upcoming election, November 3rd. And if there's a new president, the president could give 30 days notice and we're right back in the agreement. Meanwhile, the business and investment communities are taking a look at the fact that fossil fuels are not a very good investment anymore. Lots of them are divesting in order to stop losing money on fossil fuels. And we're also seeing state governments, including Massachusetts, take the lead, and many of them are moving faster than required by the Paris Agreement. And we're also seeing a lot of local communities take the lead. It's a very hopeful sign. Concord included, our town is committed to making our community more sustainable and resilient to the impact of climate change. Here's the Sustainable Concord Climate Action and Resilience Plan released this summer. And in that plan, it's a roadmap to meet the commitments of Concord's town meeting to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050. Along the way, another milestone is to achieve 100% carbon-free electricity sources by 2030 through Concord's town-owned municipal electric light plant. And we've got the young generation that's demanding a brighter future. These are students from Concord heading into the climate strike a year ago at Boston City Hall Plaza. This is one of many thousands of marches by young people all around the world. So join those who are using their voices and casting their votes and using their choices in the marketplace to fight for the future. Use your voice, use your vote, use your choices, and speak truth to power like your world depends on it. Because actually, your world does depend on it. Thanks very much. And to continue the conversation, please visit 24hoursofreality.org to take local actions. In fact, you can also hold up your smartphone to the with your camera app on this square QR bar to code to access that website. So we'll leave that up for a moment or two, where we are going to move into our question and answer period next. And I'm going to stop the screen share, and we'll have Margaret and Mike join us on camera.
Thank you, Keith, for a wonderful presentation. This has been a very important webinar and quite timely. We have one question that has come in through the chat, and I would encourage more if our audience has them. One is somewhat of a comment. I think that this slideshow would be featured if it is not at organizations like NAIS and other private school organizations. I believe education, as this webinar, is critical. Do you have anything that you might add to that, Keith?
Sure. Thanks so much, Mike, for the question, and thanks for the person in the chat room as well. Margaret can unmute, and we'll both participate. But I will say that all of the climate reality presenters can give this slideshow in some form. It can for any audience. I've given it at schools, I've given it to community groups, in libraries, at brown bag lunches, and lately have been giving it online, so through virtual ones. So climate reality presenters are available to give this or similar presentation. I have to warn you that the full presentation is 300 slides and it takes an hour. Nobody gives that one except Mr. Gore. We like working off of a 10-minute version, which sometimes morphs up to maybe 20 or 25 minutes. But we're all available, and you can go to the Climate Reality Project website to request a presentation. So if you go to that, either the 24 Hours of Reality, then it'll take you to Climate Reality, and you can request a presentation for your group.
Thanks, Keith. I'll add that link to the chat so people will have it. And I know you first trained for Climate Reality yourself back in, was it 2006?
It was in the first group, and I've given. I have to say that this is only my second virtual presentation that I've given. For the first 14 years or so, it was in person, and all of the Climate Reality trainees are now being coached on how to give it the presentation virtually. As Margaret mentioned in her part, that this 24 Hours of Reality program that we're involved in now, there are thousands of presentations going on simultaneously right now. In fact, many friends of mine are giving presentations of their own in the hours which follow, and look forward to seeing those.
So we're part of a larger global audience right now. That's also giving climate reality talks. And that's wonderful. So we have another question, and it's, do you know about rebuilding coral reefs with fragments of coral? Have you heard about that, Keith?
I've heard about it. There's certainly members of Climate Reality that are more qualified than I to give information on that. I'd be, if the person with the question would leave their contact information, we'd be glad to get back to them, or we could post some supplemental information perhaps at the when we post this video. So be happy to follow up.
Okay, well, great. So another person asks, has this been translated into languages like Hindi and Mandarin?
It has, yes, the Truth in 10 slideshow has been translated into many other languages, I think at least a dozen. And it's something that we have Climate Reality trainees from all over the world. So we do have folks who are presenting in Spanish, Portuguese, French, Chinese, Japanese, and many, many other languages. And for Climate Reality trained presenters, we have access to all of those slide decks. The public actually can have access to a version of the Truth in 10 slideshow, which they could access by going to the Climate Reality website and Truth in 10, and it'll take you to some links where you can download an earlier version of this slideshow that's available for the public.
Okay.
I'd like to jump in, talking about, the question about if it's in foreign languages. In my training, there were 10,000 people, and they had breakout rooms where there'd be smaller groups of us, 10, and it was kind of like speed dating. And so I chose like a 6 to 7 o'clock slot. And there were young people from Africa, India, many young women from India. I met in these these chat rooms, and as Keith said, China, Japan, and London. I talked to a psychiatrist who was in London, who was very, and we're all trained to give this slideshow, and it was really very heartwarming to see so many young people in their 20s and 30s, and even some high school students who are very focused and serious-minded people and set out to do something about climate change. So
that's really encouraging to know that it's that Climate Reality is involving so many people and from so many places from around the world. And for our audience today, again, we've posted it in the chat, and chat will be available in the recording. So today's webinar is being recorded, and it's being live broadcast on Facebook as well. And again, to have more information, it's climaterealityproject.org. I'd like to say something about biodiversity, because that's a big part of climate change. The reality of climate change is that we're losing habitat around the world for species. And just a shout out for one of our friends here at the Thoreau Society is conservation biologist Edward O. Wilson, who has a project called Half Earth. And I'll put the link to Half Earth in the chat so people will have that as a resource if they're interested in biodiversity, which I think is particularly germane because of Thoreau's words, and wildness is the preservation of the world. So I'll leave it at that and
Mike,
yes.
we have Peter Alden was, he organized the Great Walden BioBlitz with E.O. Wilson and put together this manual of everything that they found. So if people are interested in getting this, we can, put you in contact with Peter Alden, who's on our board of directors here and also works for Michael.
Well, that's great that you were able to share that with our audience, Margaret. Peter Alden works at the shop at Walden Pond, and he's a recognized author and has published several Audubon guides to places around the world, including throughout the United States and in Africa. So we have a question In regards to the pandemic, has the decrease of carbon emissions, airplanes especially, made a positive impact on the environment?
Well, would that it were a silver lining, but for earlier on, I'd say, if memory serves, back in March or April, when the economy truly was shut down and planes weren't flying and there were a lot of economic activity not occurring, there did seem to at least be not an increase in the level of CO2, but it's not a lasting impact. We're not seeing it. If we could all, I don't think the solution is as simple as shutting down the world and then and then the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere goes down. It's going to take a re-engineering of the entire economy. It's going to take us going to net zero, to just having our energy come from sources that do not involve CO2, and that is going to be a major shift, revolution in the way our economy operates. But I think we have the solutions there, and I think we have every opportunity to make it better.
Yeah, and the green economy is more and more important, and people are coming in contact with it more regularly than ever before. We do have a question about, somebody is requesting that they would like to see this presented to Jane Fonda for her Fire Drill Friday Zoom gatherings. So,
well, it's interesting. I wouldn't be at all surprised if one of my colleagues from Climate Reality has already presented it to her. Perhaps Mr. Gore has done it, but that's an interesting thing, and I'll definitely follow that up. Some of our climate leaders are connected to Jane Fonda's organization, and I'm curious now to find out what has she seen the slideshow, and maybe she can start presenting it.
oh, great. And I guess going back to the green economy, so I guess many of us are familiar with wind power and solar power and moving in that direction for greener energy sources. We do have a question that it would like to see us address, the question of nuclear fusion and whether or not that plays a role in terms of producing urban electricity, and how important do you think nuclear power is in terms of getting us to turn this corner so we can avoid climate catastrophe?
Yeah, nuclear is an interesting issue to talk about. Mr. Gore does not dismiss nuclear power outright, as some do. When he was in Congress, his congressional district included Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where there were a lot of nuclear jobs. But I know that from a practical standpoint, it's that one of the problems with nuclear is that it comes in just one size and it's extra large, and that the costs associated with nuclear are prohibitive from the standpoint that no one can guarantee that even if you sink a lot of money into it, that it will ultimately be permitted and begun. And so economically it's a risky enterprise. But but as far as Climate Reality is concerned, nuclear is on the table.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. And then that's been progress in terms of, or progress or not, but it's certainly been a change in attitude that's developed over the last 30 years from where we were with concern about nuclear energy in the 70s and even just changing attitudes even among members of Greenpeace in terms of the importance that nuclear energy may play in our future. It seems like that is sort of consistent with what you're saying, Keith.
Yes.
So, well, we're also aware of obviously gridlock in Congress, and being able to get anything done seems to be harder and harder. Somebody is asking, have these climate reality videos, have they been presented to Congress?
Well, I'm aware that some members of Congress have seen the presentation and some have not. I would imagine it's been offered to all, but it's sort of, and while Mr. Gore has testified in front of Congress, he was a congressman and a senator before he became vice president, that sometimes it's, if it's presented with around Mr. Gore, that's sort of a lightning rod. But there are a lot of folks, I will have to say, from 14 years of giving presentations in Massachusetts, it's been, it's been a very enthusiastic response from members of Congress. In fact, for my very first presentation, I was town manager in Provincetown back in 2006, and my very first presentation anywhere of the slideshow was at the Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies, and it was co-hosted by Congressman Bill Delahunt, who represented the Cape and Islands at the time. So I think the information is available as a resource, and I'd have to say that the most effective people to give the presentation for any member of Congress or any state representative or state senator are the constituents who live in the jurisdiction that elected official represents. It's a very powerful thing when one of your own constituents is coming forward with information, and the slideshow does provide a form of information that can be brought forward.
And we're just seeing a wave of public involvement around climate change. So if there is gridlock and there's not the progress we'd like to see in the Congress, citizens are able to take action among themselves. And so one thing I think that we've seen is the divestment movement that's been growing and having a greater impact. What would you have to say about the divestment movement that's going on, Keith?
I think it's making some progress, some genuine progress. I think that when it starts with corporate, with the environment in which a corporation board of directors can make decisions based on the long term rather than on the quarter. Don't make decisions just on the basis of profits for this quarter or the next, but for the long term. I think we will be seeing some further inroads with the divestment. Personally, hey, I'm a Harvard alum. As was said, I was glad to see that we didn't elect all 5 of the Harvard 5 of a slate of officers to the Board of Overseers, but we got 3 of the 5 elected, and so that's an inroad to try to see divestment in some of the institutions that are near and dear to us.
Yeah, that was an interesting election. Each candidate, I believe, was off the slate in terms of the Harvard 5.
The Harvard 5 were all not the approved slate, but 3 of them did win.
Yeah, so that's excellent progress. And somebody asks, can you speak about electric vehicles? This presents a challenge to our power grid.
It does. Well, I think there are a number of issues there. technological improvements, I think, are going to be the saving grace there. We see how the cost of the batteries are going down. I think in technological breakthroughs where the life of the battery is longer, where you can get more than, if you can get more than 200 miles on a full charge, then it makes more sense to use that vehicle. And you need a grid of, like when the horse was replaced by the automobile, you needed filling stations everywhere, and so having a grid of charging stations will be an important part, as well as the development of batteries that take you longer. But I think things are there. I'm just bullish on the green economy. I think there's a lot of money to be made. There's a lot of technological breakthroughs to be made, and I would love for all of those things to be coming from the United States and not China. So
Yeah.
love to see the leadership here.
And we see great progress at Walden Pond, where the building, the facilities, I believe, are completely net zero. And there is a solar array where people can charge their vehicles. So that may be in our future too, in terms of electric cars that receive their power from solar cells. That could certainly help to alleviate the pressure on the power grid.
Yeah, it's a great combination of technologies, and I'm sure we'll see other breakthroughs. I'm confident.
Margaret, do you have, would you like to speak? I know Keith and I have been going on. And
Well, I'm just very happy that people took time out of their afternoon on this beautiful day and came to our presentation about Thoreau and Al Gore and climate change. And I'd like to thank your board of directors and my board of directors for supporting this type of discussion.
yeah, it's so important. We're here at Thoreau Farm, where Thoreau was born in 1817, and in many ways this is the birthplace of ideas. And Thoreau early on could foresee that there were going to be problems with the environment, and he began speaking about them and incorporating that into his writings as early as the 1850s. And so, and his works have inspired people from around the globe. And so Thoreau readership, I think, definitely plays a role. And if not the mechanics of fighting climate change, well, he can show us what there is about the natural world that we can love and appreciate, because I think his writings really speak to the human connection to the environment.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Margaret, so much for this, for helping put this on this event tonight. And I've learned a lot about Thoreau in recent years, and I've appreciated every opportunity to interact with Thoreau Farm and the Thoreau Society, and I'm so happy to be a part of the community.
Well, thank you so much, Keith. This has been a really wonderful afternoon, and thank you, Margaret, and thank you for having the Thoreau Society to be a part of this program. We're honored.
And just one last plug for The Right Connection. I encourage everyone to see our upcoming events at www.thoreausociety.org and thoreaufarm.org. We have a program on October 15th that we're holding with Bend, a community college in Central Oregon Community College in Bend, Oregon, about 19th century transcendentalists from Concord and their influence on social justice and reform programs that are happening today. The same, we're fighting the same fight, but many years later. So I hope you all register and take advantage of that forum.
Wonderful. Thank you. So this concludes our session for today. I thank you, Margaret and Keith, for hosting this. And to all of our participants, we had over 30 participants today. Thank you for joining us and taking time out on a Saturday to be with us to discuss these important issues, climate change. Thank you.
Thank you.